Schefter dropped some clues that Marcus Mariota may be in play for the backup quarterback position in Miami. Is he the right fit for the Dolphins? We're looking at that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL Draft lead for the 33rd team. I want to give a special shout out and welcome to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Going to cost more than $5 or $50 for the Dolphins to get a little bit more comfortable with their backup quarterback situation this upcoming season, but it will be a point of emphasis for the team, as had been alluded to by Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel in the team's exit interview with the South Florida media. So, and it's not really a surprise when you consider how this team has approached what have been Achilles heel type positions in years past. You go to 2022 and it was corner, and it was the backup quarterback with Skylar Thompson. So they signed Mike White to a competitive contract and bring him in, and they bring an infusion of corners in. And then in 2023, the Achilles heel was the edge rush room. So they draft Chop Robinson, and they signed Shaq Barrett to try to remake that room. Didn't necessarily work, but it's been a pretty persistent theme of whatever has been part of the recipe for spelling doom for the team overcorrects. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're talking about playing this on both sides of the coin for the Dolphins with a backup quarterback situation, and find somebody with some long-term upside and viability, and find somebody with some short-term stability to play. And that brings you to what Adam Schefter said on the Pat McAfee show earlier this week, which was that there could be a little bit of interest in Marcus Mariota between the Raiders and the Dolphins. Quote, he's going to have some choices this offseason. So you consider the Raiders are a team that Mariota had already played for. He signed a 2-year, $17 million contract with the team when his time in Tennessee was up, and he lost that starting job to Ryan Tannehill. But it's a little different now with Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly. Yes, that Chip Kelly from when Mariota was at Oregon. That shift in leadership in that team is an element that I think probably works in the Raiders' favor. As far as Miami, it's worth noting that Marcus Mariota played his high school football at one St. Louis High School in Honolulu, Hawaii. If that's familiar, it's because that's where Tua Tagovailoa played his high school football. So there's kind of relationships with both potential teams vying for Marcus Mariota. So there's a pretty decent chance that this could materialize for Miami. And with that in mind, I've watched each of Marcus Mariota's dropbacks over the last 2 seasons. It's a total of 67 pass attempts. It's a little bit more than that on the way of dropbacks when you consider he was sacked 3 times in each of the last 2 seasons, and runs on dropbacks. It's close to 100 reps, close to 100 total reps from Marcus Mariota, with a stop in Philadelphia in 2023, in which he attempted 23 passes and played in 3 games, and then 44 pass attempts for Mariota in 2024 with a stop with the Washington Commanders as the backup to Jaden Daniels. Want to outline what I saw on tape, because it was not necessarily what I was going to expect to find with Marcus Mariota. But first, just to lay out the foundation of who this player is, as a player. Highly decorated college quarterback, 3-time first team Pac-12, drafted at the top of the draft with the number 2 overall pick in 2015 by the Tennessee Titans. He starts there for 4.5 seasons, cedes the job to Ryan Tannehill. The Titans end up making a jump with Tannehill. He goes to the Raiders, has a short stint there as the starter, didn't last or really didn't, despite the contract that they gave him, never really claimed the starting job. And then in 2022, he's in Atlanta and he's competing with Desmond Ridder. He starts 13 games. They go 5-8 in those 13 games. Marcus kind of limited, but you also are willing to concede that was an Arthur Smith-led football team that, Arthur Smith, I think, has shown some of his limitations as an offensive coordinator. The last 2 years in Philadelphia and Washington in limited stints, he's actually been quite good. And he's a player who now at this stage of his career, he's seen a lot of football. He's been in the league 10 years. He's completed almost 1,400 attempts. He's attempted almost 2,200 passes. So he has seen and played a lot of football now as a player who was a really dynamic athlete once upon a time. He can still move, but he's not the same athlete that he was when he was coming out of Oregon. But it really told a fascinating story to watch the tape and watch playing in Philadelphia with what was generally perceived to be like a pretty limited offensive play calling and coaching staff in 2023. They obviously made the huge upgrade and got Kellen Moore this past offseason as their offensive coordinator. And then this year with Washington behind Jaden Daniels and playing some meaningful reps in a couple of games and some of the situational type football stuff that he was able to put on tape. There's more teeth here than what I thought there was going to be completely honest. And I've been familiar with Marcus's game for a couple. I scouted him coming out in 2014, 2015. But I've been really covering the league on an in-depth basis for 4 or 5 years. So I knew what that 2022 season looked like in Atlanta. Was surprised on what I found on tape. We're going to get into that next here on Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, and endless possibilities. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook, whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. So Mariota on tape. The last 2 seasons, you see the limitations that kind of prevented him from becoming a high impact and consistent starter in the NFL. And I think it's worth acknowledging that if you force him off his spot and he tries to throw while off his spot and he's not being able to get downhill into the line of scrimmage, you see some accuracy that kind of pulls receivers back into contested windows, especially when he's working down the field. I think you saw a couple of instances, and there were times where he paid off and got away with it. And then there's other times where he was made to pay for it, or it could have been very bad from a decision-making standpoint. He does like to use his legs and get outside the pocket. So from that sense, there is an overlap with what the Dolphins got to taste with Tyler Huntley. But I think he is a much more refined passer and processor than what Tyler Huntley is in this stage of Tyler's career. Marcus, over the last 2 seasons, it's 79 total dropbacks. So we said close to 100 reps, 79 total dropbacks. He is completing 49 of 67, which is 73%, for 528 yards, which is 7.9 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns and 1 interception with a passer rating of 114.5 and 6 sacks taken over the last 2 years between Philadelphia and Washington. Two very different situations where Philadelphia had the great offensive line, but they had the bad coaching staff. From a play design perspective, great supporting cast. Washington seemed like a really optimized system, a little bit more limited with what they could do running the ball. Jaden Daniels led that team in rushing and had Terry McLaurin, had Zach Ertz, had John Bates, had Eckler out of the backfield. So a little bit more modest supporting cast, but a little bit better offensive infrastructure. And there were some overlaps with things that they did, that his tape did across both seasons that popped to me that are perceived to be general staples of how this offense operates. Getting outside the pocket by design with bootlegs and run action and showing the toss action and booting away and getting outside the pocket and utilizing ball handling skills to be able to be in the shotgun and ride out the mesh point at an RPO and then shoot the ball out with quick, crisp decision-making. Some perimeter screen type stuff against free access. All of this is here, and it's on tape. You go watch the Washington-Dallas game last year, which was played on January 5th, 2025. But watch that game in and of itself encapsulates a lot of these overlap things, whether it is true RPOs, which is a great strength of Tua Tagovailoa's game that they can and have built into kind of the core principles of the offense. I mean, shoot, they ran the Watson RPO with the glance wheel flat. Marcus ran it and pulled it and threw it to the wheel in stride up the sideline because the corner sucked with the glance and it vacated the entire perimeter. And it was a seamless ride the mesh fake. I'm reading as I ride the mesh fake and boom, the ball's out and it's in stride. So you see reps like that and they are tangible one-for-one type of reps. Now, the average time to throw for Marcus is not quite as consistently crisp, but you do see the in-structure type of throws that I think do parallel and create the bridge. And again, it's a bridge in my mind as I'm processing watching Mariota's tape the last 2 years. It's a bridge between what you got a taste of with Tyler Huntley as far as how to kind of run the offense differently without some of the same exact precision-oriented details that can be really exhaustive and impossible to ask somebody to replicate with your starter. With that spice and variety of being a better athlete. Now, he only had 67 pass attempts, so the time to throw, there are a couple times where he's in the pocket and he doubles back and then he spins out and he gets outside to his left and he runs and then he shoots it because the tight end kind of gears down and makes himself available. Those really aren't staples of anything that the Dolphins have seen, but that does jack up the average time to throw. Where if you were to just authentically Google or search on Next Gen Stats or PFF or whatever else, I use True Media, what is Marcus Mariota's time to throw? You'd see the number and you'd say, oh, well, that's not a Dolphins style passer. And there's reps that necessitate it, but there's also reps that are all of the things that we're used to seeing as the core principles. Remember the big thing with Huntley this year when he came in is Mike McDaniel said, yeah, he's never thrown no hitch in breakers before. That was like a big deal. You see top of drop in breakers, whether they're crosses or they're deep ins, or it's dagger or whatever else. Mariota has that on tape as well. So all of that leads me to a conclusion that this is a better stylist, not just the vibes of it, of another Hawaii quarterback, right? Like that's not what this is. There is how Marcus has matured and developed as a quarterback. The limitations still exist, right? And I think the consistency of the processing can get you into trouble. And that's why you're talking about a potential backup quarterback. But this is somebody who looked very decisive as far as, we get up to the line of scrimmage based on route leverage and understanding what the combination is on each side of the field. Where do my eyes need to start by process of eliminating routes so I'm not getting stuck on the wrong thing too early. You see capability of doing full field progressions. The accuracy is not always precision pinpoint. The decision-making, particularly if he has to hold the ball and work through it, there's ebbs and flows with that. But this is a player who does a lot more things that fit within we're used to seeing. And I think the offense is going to have to evolve this year. But I was not expecting to walk away from the tape and see, man, and we check this, and this box for things that you're looking for that exist for a quarterback to operate within what should make parallels with where you're going to try to make your strength on offense and your core identity. So that's a good development for Miami, and I think it makes sense that the Dolphins are interested in this player. Now, the economics of it gets a little interesting. We're going to get into that next here on this episode of Locked on Dolphins, so stick with us. Today's episode of Locked on Dolphins is sponsored by BetterHelp. What do you want your 2025 story to be? Every January brings a new chapter, 365 blank pages waiting for you to fill. If there's a part of your life that you want to rewrite or a plot twist you've been craving, why wait? Life isn't about fleeting resolutions. It's about taking control and becoming the author of your own story. Think of therapy as your personal editor, helping you craft the life you deserve. It's not just for crisis situations. Therapy can help you develop healthier coping strategies, improve your relationships, and empower you to be the best version of yourself. Whether you're facing a challenge or just looking for personal growth, therapy is a powerful tool to help guide your journey. Whether it's learning to set boundaries or tackle stress in new ways, therapy can help you develop skills for a better tomorrow. Even if you've never tried therapy, the benefits are clear. Finding someone to talk to and gaining fresh perspectives can help make all the difference in how you navigate life's ups and downs. Write your story with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So all that's fine and dandy, but what's the price point? Right? That's the big question for Miami because you're working in a finite resource window. You don't have $100 million in cap space. And you have a quarterback who you've already made large financial commitments to that at least makes this a part of the conversation that you need to be prepared to have. Mariota signed a one-year deal last year in Washington for a total of $6 million. And if you look at his career earnings, the year he spent in Philadelphia was a one-year, $5 million contract. And the year that he was in Atlanta he played for 1 year with $6.75 million in earnings. So the last 3 seasons have been just short of averaging $6 million per year. If you told me you could sign Mariota for $6 million per year, and it might be a little bit more than that if it's between you and the Raiders. But with the flexibility that you have with signing a one-year contract with void years, and it's a necessary evil and a part of the process that Miami has largely been very responsible with so far with void years. There's teams out there that have tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars in deferred money and void years for players that aren't under contract to play for the team. The Dolphins are not in that stratosphere or remotely close to it yet. They've got like a half dozen contracts that have any void years at all on their books. And a good portion of them are players that you feel like are going to be here for the foreseeable future. So again, the way void years work is they're dummy years on the back end of, say, a one-year contract to help you defer out the signing bonus. So if you sign Marcus Mariota for, say, let's just call it $7 million to keep the numbers nice and even, right? And Marcus Mariota signed for $7 million. It was a $2 million base salary and a $5 million signing bonus, right? And you'd say, oh, well, that's $7 million in cap space you need to have because it's a one-year deal. Not necessarily, because you could take that one-year contract and put 4 dummy years on the back end of it to spread the $5 million signing bonus out across 5 seasons, in theory, which would be $1 million would be accounted for this year, $1 million in each of the next 4 years after that. So the base salary would be 2, and then 1/5 of the signing bonus is 3, and that's the salary cap space you need to account for on a 1-year $7 million contract with void years on the back end of Marcus Mariota's contract. Of course, the catch there is if you don't re-sign Marcus Mariota, all the deferred money accelerates to the next year, so you'd have a $4 million dead cap hit in 2026 for Marcus Mariota. But for where this team is at, for some of the contracts, the big contracts you're talking about potentially offloading off your books between this year and next year with Teron Armstead and Tyreek Hill and potentially Bradley Chubb, you're talking about pennies on the dollar relative to what your books are going to be clearing and opening up. And I think that's really helpful perspective when if a $4 million dead cap hit in 2026 would be the cost of getting Marcus Mariota under contract, if that's the player you feel is the right fit. And I do think he's a player that fits in a lot of ways. So I'd support it if that was the decision that they made. Now, I don't think you could just sign Mariota and throw your hands up and be done, because you want a long-term piece so you don't have to keep playing this game and borrowing from yourself until you have an opportunity to change your starting quarterback if you continue to have durability issues with Tua Tagovailoa down the road. Right? You don't want to put yourself in that situation. So give yourself multiple bites of the apple at this position. But if you do that with Marcus Mariota, you're probably not getting real competitive into the young busts who are maybe looking for a career revival type of situation. I think this would be a great signing for the Dolphins. I didn't think I was going to feel that way when I went into the film study. But the way that he throws in breakers, the ways that he has his ball handling skills, the way he gets outside the pocket and throws on the move when he is intending to throw on the move, the way his processing has, I think, improved in a lot of ways. Pre-snap processing has improved in a lot of ways from even the Atlanta season with that offensive structure and with Arthur Smith. Doing it in multiple systems with good coaches and bad coaches and good supporting casts and bad supporting casts and modest offensive lines and elite offensive lines. I like it. I like the idea a lot. So let's see if the Dolphins go that way. We have about a month, a little more than a month till the start of the league calendar year. So there's plenty more ground to cover. We've been doing some free agency positional reviews. We'll do some more individual player deep dives as well along the way as well. I hope you come back and see us. I'm Kyle Krabs. You can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It's your team every day. Fins up. Appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I'm out of here. Go Fins.